found another bottle. I remember when we visited you.
I saw that in the background there.
Yeah, you see, it says Brandborg.
Yeah.
But this one, it comes from California. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And when did you start making wine in California? When you transitioned here?
Well, San Francisco is my hometown, and I got introduced to home winemaking through my aunt and uncle, my mom's brother. And the first experience was very charming. I went out to a vineyard in the East Bay in Contra Costa County, picked grapes. This old Italian gentleman met us as we pulled up, me and a buddy. And he says, before we go to work, we have to have some wine. And since it's before lunch, we'll have white wine. And he took us into his barn and grabbed a jug off the shelf and poured us a little jelly jar glass of white wine. And then we went out and picked. I jumped right in, kind of whole hog, and made a full barrel my first effort. And after we picked enough grapes to make a barrel of wine, he goes, you guys are great, stick around, my wife's made lunch. So we sat under this oak tree with this Italian family and had this home-cooked meal. And of course, the red wine was flowing by then. And I drove home. I'd moved from San Francisco to a town in Marin, Fairfax. And I had some friends meet me in the driveway, and we had a grape stomp. And I went, you know, this is kind of fun. So it kind of grew. I met a neighbor who was growing grapes in Anderson Valley in Mendocino County. And I started lending a hand at his place. And he was growing Pinot Noir, Riesling, and Gewürztraminer. And so I kind of grew up working with those varieties. And after not the most stellar college career down at UC Santa Barbara, I came back to San Francisco. And I, after kind of bumming around doing a bunch of different things, a couple of years later, fell into a job working on the waterfront in San Francisco, a union gig, a Longshore Warehouse Union. And a number of years later, I started going, well, this winemaking is more fun than my day job. And so in 1986, I got my garage bonded as a home occupation in Fairfax. And my first commercial release was 300 cases, Anderson Valley, Pinot Noir, Riesling, and that first year I got some Zinfandel from a vineyard on Mount Veeder in Napa. And then I had one of those light bulb moments where you go, oh, well, this part's been fun, but now I have to sell it. And I had no marketing, sales, or business background. I just bought a sample bag and I took to the streets of San Francisco after work, started knocking on doors, making cold calls. And within a couple of 3 years, I knew pretty much everybody in food and beverage around the San Francisco Bay Area. And I placed my wines in lots of well-known name restaurants and retail stores. Serge, I didn't see which bottle that is. And then I started getting grapes from Central and Maria Valley, always made in Anderson Valley, Mendocino Pinot Noir. So the label was Brandborg at the time. I never wanted to put my own name on the bottle, but I had a friend my friend in Anderson Valley, I was able to truck on weekends and I was hauling grapes down for him to a little urban winery in Berkeley. And got to know the owner winemaker there quite well. And sitting around talking to him, he's quite the linguist. And he goes, well, you know, you're going to be out selling this wine yourself. It's not going to hurt to have your name on the label when you walk in a place and go, hi, I'm Terry Brandborg, and try to sell the wine. So that's kind of how this all got started.
I don't think for people who are here, our last name would have worked on the wine labels. Yeah, that was a 1992 Brandborg Pinot Noir from Mendocino. So yeah, that's the one. So well, thanks for sharing that, and maybe we'll move on to the next wine. Like one thing that I remember when I saw the Coastal Cuvée, that's the white wine with the green label. Yeah, so when I saw that bottle at first, I was thinking, well, I don't know if I'm gonna like that wine because it's a kind of an interesting blend. So can you tell us a little bit more about it? How you came up with the idea of mixing these three grapes together and things like that?
Well, I looked back at some notes, Serge, and it made me remember that when you were in the tasting room one day and I was, thinking about a name for this blend, you tossed out Dirty Blonde. And I'm starting to think maybe Dirty Blonde would have been a better name for it.
It might have, yeah. Maybe it was.
And I can see the label now, actually.
We should change it.
But, we make Riesling, we make Pinot Gris, we make Sauvignon Blanc, and we buy all of those grapes. And the risk is if you don't take them from the grower, somebody else will step in and take your place. And we were really wanting to keep our sources and keep our relationships with our growers. There's been a couple of blends similar to this in Alsace. This blend, very much like this, would be called Adelsvicker. I kind of thought about using Adelsvicker as a name, but chose not to. So it's a blend of those four varieties. And it was kind of funny how the name came about. We hadn't settled on anything yet, and it was before we bottled it and had labels printed. And I had all the component pieces had been racked and fined and filtered and were ready to assemble. And we had a really big crowd in the winery one night. And I went back and I put together a graduated cylinder of what the blend would end up being. And I brought it up and I had people taste all around our corner, all around our bar. And there was, different groups and nobody was really paying attention to what anybody else was doing. But everybody who tasted it had some reference to either being at the beach or having the smell of the ocean or the waves or something like that. So that's how Coastal Cuvée came about.
Okay, excellent. Well, now let's, since we talked, you touched on Gewürztraminer. Can you talk, I love this grape, and I would say outside of Finger Lakes, you make the best Gewürztraminer that we ever tasted. And also when we talked about, so maybe you can talk a little bit more about that variety, why you picked it. How come you're able to make it so good? That's such an amazing wine out of it.
Just luck.
that was short, but
Don't believe that for a minute.
It's the job of a winemaker is to take good fruit and not muck it up. And Sue and I spent a lot of time looking for property. We met at a wine tasting in Jackson, Wyoming in '98. She moved to San Francisco a year later. Fell into everything in the winery and all the winemaking, the sales, business admin, everything. And by that time, I was making wine in a rented warehouse space in Richmond. We started thinking that we'd like to get out and actually own some property and plant our own vineyard. So we discovered Elkton after learning that Riesling, Gewürz, and Pinot Noir had been grown here since 1972. And as I said, that's kind of what I grew up working with, primarily from Anderson Valley and Mendocino. When we came and took a look, we loved the look of the area. I contacted a realtor to go do a tour, and I said that we had driven up to the Bradley Vineyard, which is one of our neighbors here in Elkton, but we didn't find anybody. But she goes, well, I'll give you his name and phone number. And so I called John Bradley, sitting in my kitchen in San Francisco, and chatted with him. And what I didn't know, I had awareness of the Umpqua Valley prior to being here, but the area has always grown a lot more grapes than there's been winery production capacity. So people were shipping grapes out of the area to other wineries down in Southern Oregon or up north in the Willamette. So we were able to form these relationships with people, and they went, oh, wow, 5 minutes away instead of 3 or 4 hours away. So we started working with Gewürztraminer from the Bradley Vineyard our first year here in 2002. We now have another source, the Annandor Vineyard as well. Very similar terrain. They're kind of next door to each other. The first guy who planted those varieties here in Elkton, Ken Thomason, planted in '72, as I said, and then Bradley's and the Bing family used cuttings from those first plantings to plant theirs. So we're a very cool coastal climate here in Elkton. I think it's ideally suited to those Alsace style varieties. And the vineyard sites produce really amazing aromatics and just great fruit. We use a touch of sweetness to balance the acidity that we get in the wine. The winemaking is pretty simple. It is fermented in stainless. I use a yeast on it that was isolated in Alsace, which seems to work really well with that. All the commercial yeasts, I mean, they're not GMO. They're, you know, just breeding programs that people develop yeast that they find that have desirable characteristics from different vineyards. So to me, what we're trying to do and preserve is the expression of the vineyard and the expression of the variety and not get in the way. And we've been very fortunate. Eric Asimov in the Times 12 years ago called our Gewurz the best in the country. And the 15 is what we're shipping now, right? Was a wine enthusiast, top 100 of the year, number 23 last year. So we're trying to promote it. It's great with sushi. It's great with blue cheese, spicy Thai, and we just think it's a really great variety. We tell people when it gets close to the holidays, it's the single best bottle of wine you can put on your Thanksgiving table because it goes with everything from the turkey to the dressing to the gravy to the cranberries, all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, it's excellent with cheesecake and pecan pie. And yeah, actually I'll go to when we pick the Indian food because we like spicy food and the sweetness in Gewurz actually helps to offset that. So it really works well with it. Now,
So do
yes,
you have a bottle of Gewurz with you?
yeah, we have it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we have a few. Yeah, we have a few. I mean, I thought, you know, maybe I'll do like a lineup of all the bottles, the different bottles that I have. We'll take a table. So we'll, and actually switching gears a little bit. Now, Sue, is it this, maybe you can share with us, but when you watch the movies and you hear the stories like, we bought a winery in Provence, and you know, you being a winemaker's wife, is it as glamorous as they show in the movies?
Every bit is.
So you drive convertible while your husband there just counting money?
Well, I think you have to have a lot of passion to be in the business. And I was in the medical field prior, and you know, I had no idea that I would fall in love with winemaking, a winemaker, wine, Pinot Noir, as much as I have. So it's not an easy business. It's a lot of hard work.
You should tell Melanie that.
And a lot of people don't see that, how much hard work it is. They just say, oh, that's the job of a lifetime. It's so glamorous. Like all you do is sit around all day drinking wine. But you bring pleasure to people. So it makes your heart feel really good to know that you're putting something out there that people are going to enjoy. And we try to keep the pricing good, you know, so more people can enjoy it. So.
I see.
I remember when we first tried Ferris wheel Pinot Noir. We actually, for a couple of years, were in love with that. And this is when we heard your love story. Could you
can tell that.
just remind what's behind that label and something about you? How did you two met?
So Terry and I met at a wine tasting in Jackson, Wyoming. That's where I was living. And every Memorial weekend, he would bring his California wine to this tasting. So backtrack 2 years before that tasting, the doctor that I worked for one day asked me if I drank red wine. And I said, no, been home raising little kids. I didn't grow up with wine like a lot of people do. And he said, well, I have this bottle of Brandborg 1992 Santa Maria Valley Pinot from California. Let's stay after work and drink it. And I said, okay. So that wine was like the best thing that ever crossed my lips. So the first wine I drank plus Pinot Noir, and he made it. So fast forward 2 years, I went to the tasting and I met him. So I fell in love with the wine before the man. I think that's okay. And so we met at that tasting, and wow, we really hit it off. And he said, well, some of us are going for beer and pizza if you'd like to join us. So I did. And we exchanged addresses, and then we started a letter correspondence from California to Wyoming. So there were emails. We're not that old, but we decided to write the letters just because it was a good way to get to know each other. You know, letters, you can just keep rereading them. Emails aren't the same. They just, something about the handwriting. I don't want to see it go away. But anyway, we saved all the letters. So about, oh, I have it. So 3 months into our letter writing.
Okay.
Tell them coming back.
She's returning.
Okay, so usually I have to tell people at the winery it's on our refrigerator at home, but we're home. So I sent Terry the mail. Can you see this? Oh, it's bleached.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It's a little red-haired girl and blue-eyed boy cartoon couple sitting on the seat of a Ferris wheel.
A little bit to the left. A little bit more. And a little lower.
Down. There you go.
I was showing it to the picture. Okay. So anyway, the caption underneath says, "Love puppets on a Ferris wheel." And Terry said, "Sue, why did you send me that?" And I said, well, it fit in an envelope because it's flat. The people kind of look like us.
Started giving me ideas.
So, you know, a year later, I moved to California to join him to make wine. And then it became really obvious that we were missing something with the picture, that we'd love to have our own vineyard and get our hands dirty. So that's when we started looking for property. And 2 years in California of looking, we had nothing had our name on it. We couldn't afford anything really. So we looked at Oregon and we found this beautiful spot, and we'd love any of you that want to come down and see us. We love to have visitors because that's the way you can really tell what we have here. So keep fast forwarding to make the story short. We have 5 acres of our own, and we laid it all out ourselves. Did all the fencing, all of that. The high school senior boys helped us plant the vines. And so it was a real labor of love. And when we were done, Terry said, well, we need a name for it. You know, what are we going to call it? And he said, let's call it the Ferris wheel. Long story short, whatever. We named the 5 acres the Ferris Wheel Vineyard. And then the sequel is the Love Puppets Pinot. So, Love Puppets. We used to tell people, don't Google it. Don't Google Love Puppet. Yeah. But now when you look it up, if you look long enough, our label comes up. Oh.
So you make, Terry, you make a few different Pinot Noirs. So let's say something that I recommended is Westbrook, Hendricks Valley, and Young Carlton. What people can expect when they drink these different wines, because they have a distinct fruit in each one of them. What makes them different and what unites them?
Well, our first year here, having made Pinot Noir since 76 or 7, and then commercially since 86, I had the good fortune of getting fruit in Central Coast. There was a grower producer day every year there, and people would share their information. My first invite to the IPNC here in Oregon was in '94, and I started going to the Steamboat Conference then. And so I developed kind of what our program would be for Pinot Noir. I've never wanted to go for the biggest extraction. Everything's fermented in open top fermenters, hand punch downs, 100% French oak barrel aged, about 20% new. So what we were looking for was following that basic protocol. And I told Sue, I said, this is a whole new ballgame for us when we moved here to Oregon. We have all these different vineyards and we really don't know what we're going to get out of them. So we made the wines all the same technique, same protocol. And I said, we'll just start tasting through them and see what we have after we get them in barrel. And as we started tasting through the wine, what became apparent to us was that we had two kind of distinctly different profiles based primarily on soil types, elevations, and how far north in the Umpqua Valley they came from. So that's how our benchlands was born, mainly alluvial deposits along banks of the Umpqua. And then we used to call it Northern Reach, and we changed the name to Love. Those are the more northern sites, all dry farmed and a bit heavier clay soils, and some of them are higher elevation. So in terms of body and structure with our Pinot Noir, our model and goal is more old world stylistically. We don't ascribe to the big, bold, jammy, really ripe and extracted style of wines that you can find in the US and California in particular. We want, the character of the vineyard to come through. So Westbrook, that Serge had mentioned, is an interesting site. It's one of the more southern sites that we work with.
Did you like it? Did you like the Westbrook?
Yeah.
Well, it is one of our bigger Pinots. Very interesting site, a bit warmer than we are here in Elkton. It's down closer to Sutherland. It's on a basalt bluff and has very shallow soils, which I think contributes to that character. And interesting clonal selections were planted there, which are two of our favorites, the Burgundy clones 114 and 777. There's been 86 different clonal types of Pinot Noir identified so far, last reading that I did in Burgundy, and only about 15 of those have been propagated and imported to the US, and then they have to go through a whole quarantine period before they're distributed to nurseries and then multiplied and let out to the industry. But those two really seem to complement one another. 777 tends to have a bit of racy acidity. The 114 tends to be a kind of a almost, what would you say, musky or fruit quality, but they just seem to work really well together.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit again. And now it's going to be kind of a series of questions. Don't think too long. Just try to respond. And possibly we want to hear, if each one of you have a different answer, we would love to know. So the first question, what is your favorite noise at the winery?
Oh, favorite noise.
The bottling truck pulling away.
Okay, it's sold. Okay.
I would actually say the bottles clanging is they're clamoring on the line to get filled, because they're standing there like little kids all shaking, getting excited to get filled.
And what noise at the winery do you hate?
Oh.
The swearing that comes from the back sometimes.
Wow. Since we're on that, what's your favorite curse when something goes wrong at the winery or vineyard?
I'm not sure I should say that.
He'll get beeped for that.
Yeah, Sue's got a buzzer here if I misbehave. So.
Don't worry, we'll mute it, but you know, just curious to know. Okay, and
F me.
okay, okay. Well, you've tried other things in your life before becoming a winemaker. What did you like more? Well, I guess that's a mute question because you probably like making wine more than other things that you do.
Yeah, I used to make money in the waterfront. Let's see, when I came back from college, I got my first job at 13. I was hanging out with older guys in San Francisco and going around, running around and starting to go to rock and roll concerts and stuff like that. And I needed some pocket money. So I cleaned up a butcher store the whole time I was going through high school. I caddied out at San Francisco Club, of course. When I went to college, I put myself largely through school by being a merchant seaman. I was sailing during the summers. And then when I ran out of dough, I'd work in the commons, food service and stuff. So when I got to San Francisco, let's see, what did I do? I drove tow truck for a while, hung out with meter maids and highway patrolmen and cops and stuff like that, towing cars away. I worked in a cabinet shop for a while doing laminating for a Formica manufacturing cabinet maker. I worked at a garage out in the Mission District, a gas station, and then I did some construction work for a while. And then I fell into this job working on the waterfront. My boss was very accommodating. When I got my bonded garage done, we were starting to do some State Department work, and I built a secure cage that we had to keep the stuff in, and he allowed me to keep my wine in there so I could take it out after work and go peddle wine and store it there. Sue likes to say that, people go, well, working in a warehouse and longshore work is a lot different than the wine business. And I go, no, not as much as you may imagine. I'm still moving boxes, and I still spend many hours on a forklift during harvest in particular. Sue likes to say I'm a graduate of Fork U. I got that from one of my cohorts on the waterfront years and years ago. So I guess that's too long of an answer since you said keep it short. But we're really loving what we're doing, and we enjoy all aspects of it. Getting out and meeting people, working in the markets, traveling around the country, meeting people in our tasting room. The work in the vineyard's very therapeutic. I listen to my iPod in the tractor. So yeah, it's it's not the road to riches, but it's not a bad life either. So.
Okay. So is there any profession that you would like to attempt other than winemaking?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Retirement. Just sitting around drinking wine all day, every day, and visiting.
Living the movies, yeah. And what do you guys do for fun when you're not making wine or moving boxes?
We like the outdoors. We get out and hike. We like to camp, fish, canoe. We like live entertainment. We go to theater, the OCT in Eugene. I grew up in San Francisco, so live entertainment has always been an important part of my life. So we do, we go to as many live music shows as we can find when there's artists around that we enjoy. So we go to theater. When we travel, we try to go out at night, and if we don't have work in the evenings, go out and do that kind of stuff. So a lot of different things. We enjoy travel too. Neither one of us were able to get away and do like European vacations and stuff before the last few years. So we've been to, we try to go for 3 weeks at a time. I figure if we're going to spend the money to buy a plane ticket, we want to try to immerse ourselves. So we've really enjoyed that. The last couple of years have been kind of weird. We haven't, but I want to start resuming that again. I had in mind a late spring trip to Germany this year, which we have not been to. Having made Riesling all these years, I really wanted to go around. And we have a very good friend in the industry who works for Ernie Lozen Brothers, one of the main Riesling producers here in the U.S. So I know we've met Ernie a couple of times, and we could get lots of introductions and spend time there. So yeah, there's not too much moss that grows under us. We keep moving pretty good most of the time. So
Okay, thanks for sharing. And if you had an opportunity to take a ride on a time machine, what time in your life would you travel to, and what would you say to your younger self?
What were you thinking when you married that woman? That was the first. That was the first.
Sue, and what time would
His
you travel?
first wife's name was Susan A. Brandborg, and I'm Susan A. Brandborg. It's a different middle, but it's still A.
I joked that we didn't have to change the monograms on the bedding, but no, we don't have monogram bedding.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
well,
I have
and
to-
Sue, what time in your life you would travel to? And what would you say to yourself?
Me? What
Yeah.
time I travel to? I wouldn't want to go back and revisit anything, to be honest, because I always think the best is still yet to come.
Okay.
And I think you gotta live life every day and look forward to the future. One thing I want to quickly tell you, because we're so rural here, all this shelter in place has been really hard on a lot of people. We're 6 miles from our winery. We have a 4-mile driveway both ways. We can walk, not see anyone. We can go down to the winery and work every day. It's not a whole lot big. I mean, we're together all the time. So it's not a huge difference for us, except the little, things that make life a little more pleasurable, but that's okay. But we're really, really lucky to be where we are.